At today's hearing before the House Financial Services Committee, Secretary Geithner and Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke are expected to argue for larger authority to regulate financial markets. Here's the headline in the Washington Post: expanded powers sought for Treasury. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think crime wouldn't pay if the government ran it. I mean, I think that we're in this problem today not because of lack of regulation, but because Congress actually overregulated. Congress told the banking industry, look, you have to make these ninja loans to people with no assets, no jobs, and no income, or we're going to start penalizing you. I think it was an overregulation by the Congress that was in large part responsible for where we are today. Now, that's not the entire story. There's more than enough blame to go around, to fill this room up with blame, but I think it was overregulation.
You think there was overregulation of the secondary banking system or the shadow banking system, those credit default swaps, those sort of complicated financial derivatives that people blame for putting us in this situation?
That was also a cause of it, but I think it was downstream. I think the initial thing was the overregulation by Congress. Now, you look at the Securities and Exchange Commission. They have 1,100 lawyers approximately. I don't know how many total employees they have. And they file about 600 complaints a year. And a lot of those complaints are if Greta applied for something and fails to dot an I or cross a T, they call that a complaint. But it essentially comes down to the fact that for every lawyer they have, they file one case every other year. Now, if I wanted to look at that on a local perspective, like I try and explain it to my constituents, let's say it's a local police department in charge of enforcing traffic laws instead of securities laws in a Securities Exchange Commission. If my traffic patrol if the officers only write an average of one ticket every other year, I either have too many traffic control officers or the ones I have are not doing their job.
Queens, New York, Republican line.
Yes, Congressman, very good point. You're the only one that makes sense talking about making our own product in this country and keeping the money here. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My point is this: the stimulus package that our president that they're putting into place is only going to create temporary jobs. Is that true?
Well, there's a lot wrong with the stimulus package, notwithstanding the fact we were given from 11:30 at night to 9 o'clock in the morning to read 1,178 pages. We printed a copy. It burned up 6 cartridges and burned up 1 copy machine, actually. But only 11% of that stimulus money is going to be spent this year. It trails out. It has a trend line out to 2020. I would think that stimulus means stimulus. Let's put on the thing that you resuscitate hearts with. Let's give this thing a big bang and let's throw everything we have at it if we want to stimulate it. Not 11% this year and so much next year. But again, there needs to be a long-term plan so that you can measure. Hold the plan accountable. What's going to happen this month? What should happen? What should we expect next month? Not crisis du jour. That's not the way you should run a government. That's not the way you should. No business successfully is run like that. You have to have a plan. You have to work the plan. You have to have a measure of accountability to see if you're on track, if you're going in the direction you want. The failure to do that is one of the reasons we are where we are today, unfortunately.
Hardyville, Kentucky, Democrats line.
Yes, ma'am. I was calling to tell them they should just set up a rebate bank, relief bank, a government, and put an agent in each bank and collect all the bad loans and assets and cut the interest down.
You're talking about a bad bank?
Yes, ma'am. And set the interest down where people will make the payment and let them make it to that relief bank of the government. They could put an agent in each bank and let him work with that bank.
An alternative to what Secretary Geithner is proposing, which is creating a bad bank of all the bad toxic assets that are out there. What do you think about that idea?
Well, that's one way to go about it. Another way, first, is to have the people that actually hold the paper now, the banks that have the money now, mediate that with the people who are in default. Now, they say they have begun to do that. I know they didn't do it for a long time. When we had them in as witnesses, I questioned some, and I gave some specific examples where I knew that was not happening. But in the best of all worlds, they would negotiate now, and they'd say, well, listen, this is where you are. Certainly, an example I used was a couple who bought a house worth about $500,000, lost their job. The mortgage on it was about $400,000. The value had dropped down to about $200,000. And they were a couple payments behind, and the bank was refusing to take their payments. If you can believe that. Said, no, you have to catch all your payments up or we're not going to take them. Well, obviously the thing that would be in their best financial interest would be to short sell that house and go buy one down the street. They get rid of a $150,000 mortgage liability and have cheaper payments. And the downside would be, for the bank, of course, they would now have a home that they've got $400,000 owed on that's worth $250,000, and once the bank gets that property, traditionally they can only get about 50% of what it's worth or what they have in it. So it's a terrible reduction. If you can get the banks to mediate that up first, which they say they're going to do now, it's better off for the consumers, it's better off for the lending institution, and ultimately it's better for the taxpayers in this country who are asked to pick up the tab for the mismanagement.
This is the headline in the Washington Post. Obama to pursue budget goals on the Hill. President Obama is expected to address Senate Democrats on Wednesday when budget committees are scheduled to meet in the House and Senate to consider the $3.6 trillion spending plan for the fiscal year that begins in October. There's a couple of opinion pieces this morning about the deficit and President Obama's budget. Here is the Washington Times. Obama budget breaks the bank. Higher taxes, sharp spending cuts will inevitably result later. Your thoughts?
Well, about that I know just what I've read, Greta, and I've read that the Congressional Budget Office, which is truly a bipartisan operation, has said the budget is unsustainable. It will end up with debt, I think, 3 or 4 times greater than Bush ran up. I don't think the president intends to do that, and I think probably they'll end up having another look at that.
All right, next phone call. A couple more for the Congressman. Chicago. Good morning.
Good morning. I just want to say thank you to C-SPAN. I think you guys are great there. My question is, Congressman, you had made a comment earlier where you said something to do with the bankruptcy, that judges can rewrite mortgages now. Well, I think there's a slight history on that. The original law of bankruptcy was done where, let's say, the judge could a person could list all their assets, go before a judge. You can list your house, your boat, let's say 2 motorcycles, et cetera, et cetera. And then he could look at your assets. If you had a loss of job or employment, he could say, okay, you can keep your house and 1 car, for example. Then they changed the law. This is the one where John Edwards and Hillary Clinton had admitted that they did change the laws, where at this point, the second law of bankruptcy, the judge had no ability to list the house, for example. The house was taken off the list. He can make a judgment on the boat, the car, let's say 2 motorcycles or whatever, all your assets. But the house was removed off of the bankruptcy law. That was the last one. And that's why a lot of these homes went straight into foreclosure, because the judge had no power to render any decision on a home.
Congressman?
Her point is very good, Greta. There's 2 extremes. One says government stay out of that. It's a private contract between a lender and a borrower. The other one says a judge ought to be able to intercede and change the terms of the mortgage, the amount of the mortgage. And then there's a plan in the middle, which is kind of where I am, that I think there should be, like a corporation can go into receivership. Before they go into bankruptcy, they can go into receivership, and a judge can say, hey, hold off, everybody step back, take a breath, let's see if we can work our way out of this without the creditor suffering or without the principal suffering. And I think there needs to be that middle step for the homeowners in this country right now that are in trouble. I think, ultimately, I don't think a judge should be able to change terms of a mortgage, but I think he should be allowed to give a timeout in everybody's interest, especially the taxpayer's best interest, because if we keep you in your home and you pay off your home for what you agreed to pay off your home for, everyone in this country benefits from it.
Last phone call here. Columbia, South Carolina, Republican line. Columbia, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My question is this, sir. Everybody, as you were talking about that there was more regulation from Congress to the banks, why isn't it said, you never hear it said, about when Carter put into effect the Community Investment Act and that Clinton implemented it, and that Janet Reno, plus Congress has absolutely enforced that to make the banks do loans on houses $200,000-$300,000 when the people only made $20,000 a year. Don't you think that people, Barney Franks, Chris Dodd, Charlie Rangel, that Walters congressman from California, don't you think that they should be accountable? There is enough blame to go around, but it was those that stood up in front of Congress and, in essence, the American people to say Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were fine.
Congressman?
Well, there's more than enough blame to go around, and there were some Republican administrations that failed to do anything about it, a Republican Congress, and that failed to make the changes when they were in power. So we can't lay it all at the foot of the other party, unfortunately. Wish we could, but there's some blame for the Republicans too.
AIG bonuses, will you ask about those and that situation at today's hearing?
I have asked about AIG bonuses in the past. It was somewhat astounding to me, Greta, that we had 73 people getting bonuses that exceeded $1 million. Now, we're not talking office workers that, make $50,000, got a $10,000 bonus. These are 73 people that got bonuses that exceeded $1 million, and they were called retention bonuses, and 11 of them are no longer with AIG.
So you won't ask about it today, or you will?
Well, I've already asked about it, and I've got a pretty good answer from them, and actually it made a little bit of sense. But where are we going bonuses from here? I think the legislation the other day that would try and tax them at 90%. I heard someone that voted for that last night say that it was a cop-out, and I think it was. It will never pass. That law will never pass. It's unconstitutional, and it was just a way to kind of take the blame off of Congress and show that we're going to beat up on these people that are getting this bonus. I mean, it's Congress's fault for giving them the money in the first doggone place, to throw around and misspend.
So the legislation is likely dead in Congress.
I would bet that it's not going to ever pass.
All right, Congressman, thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it. We're going to continue this conversation with the Democrat that sits on the